was baptized into the Jehovah's Witness religion when I was 15 years old. And I never questioned it. There were adults in the congregation that knew about the abuse. I went to those elders. I was putting my life on the line because if my mom found out that I told anyone about the abuse, she would have killed me. And those brothers said, go home and obey your mother.
Think about the apostate-driven lies that Jehovah's organization is permissive toward pedophiles. I mean, that is ridiculous, isn't it?
I knew inside how wrong it felt. I knew how sick I felt. How could you not say something?
You're in a false religion. You're in a cult.
I feel like the religion preys on people at their most vulnerable.
This organization is made to put people in a box, make them fearful for their lives.
Maybe God is real, but it's not this.
So much hidden documentation of child abuse that Watchtower does not want the public to know about.
I knew that this was not going to get out unless someone did something about it.
The problem of sexual abuse in the Jehovah's Witness organization is much, much more significant than in the Catholic Church.
Once you believe in something this strongly, it could be anything. You'll do it.
I can't leave it alone. I know what this organization is responsible for doing.
We're attempting to leave, but we're kind of encircled at the moment.
We should do the right thing. But they don't do the right thing. I was a happy witness for 43 years. Ever since I was a child, I've always been a proponent for justice. And so I became a witness because I thought this was just, that the world would get better. It was the atomic bomb age. There was the concentration camps. I took those scriptures literally about a paradise earth that God would bring about because I wanted all people to be treated justly.
Surely all of us are thrilled at the prospect of surviving the end of this wicked world and living on into God's righteous new order. What a grand future awaits us.
Jehovah's Witnesses think that the world is ending, and so since everything in this world is going to be basically burned up at Armageddon, the most important thing to do right now is to preach so that you can teach it to others and save yourself and save other people.
The thing that attracted me to the Watchtower Society was that they taught that Armageddon was so close that those who were living now would never have to die, but that they could live forever.
The basic beliefs of Jehovah's Witnesses is that this world one day will come to an end and God will bring in a paradise earth.
Jehovah's Witnesses came along with a positive message, I thought, from the Bible, and that is what I wanted, to please God.
Jehovah's Witnesses feel that they have the truth.
I enjoyed being different to a certain degree. I liked not being one of the masses who weren't enlightened. There was a certain allure to that, feeling like I had the truth.
I felt that I had won the lottery. I was born into the only true religion.
The Jehovah's Witness religion itself was based upon the original work of Charles Russell back in the 1800s.
From before the blessings of Messiah's kingdom, for which so long we have prayed, thy kingdom come.
Charles Taze Russell was a prolific writer and a very good businessman. He was very much into the publishing and selling of his books.
Charles Taze Russell had no intention of starting a new religion. The Watchtower was basically the name of the journal.
He started the Watchtower magazine in 1879, so I don't know that you would call it a religion from its outset.
Russell established a corporation, the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society.
They saw the need to purchase their own printing equipment and move to a place that was close to the shipping lanes in the East River. So Charles Russell moved the organization to Brooklyn, New York. The organization was expanding so rapidly, and it's interesting to look back and see all of those videos of the printing presses going back in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s. The Jehovah's Witnesses started expanding outside of the U.S., and they continued to expand until now they're in well over 200 countries around the world. In 1969, Watchtower purchased Squibb Pharmaceutical buildings at 2530 Columbia Heights, and they turned them into the famous Watchtower headquarters complex. There was such an iconic image of the Watchtower overlooking the East River and the Brooklyn Bridge. They were so proud of the fact that they were in the middle of the most important city in America.
My husband and I were invited to be part of the headquarters staff of the Watchtower. The Jehovah's Witnesses were going through a growth period. There were 4,000 people in the complex at the foot of the Brooklyn Bridge. I was transferred into the writing department. The writing department generates all the articles that appear in all of the organization's literature. The October 8th, 1991 Awake magazine had an article about how to deal with victims of child abuse. So there's 8 million people all reading this, and the article really opened a Pandora's box for the Watchtower organization. It received more response than almost any other article in the history of the Watchtower. There was a windstorm of remarks and statements and letters. Around the world, Jehovah's Witnesses thought that this article about child abuse was a time to talk about their child abuse, that this Jehovah's Witness molested me when I was a child. I wanted to help to make this issue known because the lives of children were at stake. The Awake editor and I decided to put a package together of material to show the governing body, who were presiding elders, the immense problem, and to prove to them that something had to be done.
The governing body are 8 men. They've come up through the ranks of Jehovah's Witnesses. They claim to be anointed by God.
They're celebrities, I think, to a degree.
And they are the only individuals on the face of the earth who are spokespeople for God.
It took great faith to break free from the darkness brought on by centuries of false religious practices.
You represent the Most High God, Jehovah. And you also have to have conduct that supports the fact that you do worship this true God.
There will be many others who will come back, who will have to abandon their former way of life. I was thinking, as an example, a homosexual.
They're the conduit for the Almighty God that you believe in and worship. And so if you don't believe these people, who are the spokespeople for God, then you're disobeying God. And that's actually what the witnesses teach.
I just wanted to do my part to clean out known molesters, because that's what the Bible says to do, to put out the wicked man. They couldn't agree on what to do about it, and some said it was a fad. If you were a woman and a mother, and you learned what I did, you wouldn't do the same thing. You wouldn't rest at night. But people don't say anything. This is an organization that you don't march with signs and say, remove them, remove them. The dirty little secrets are well kept.
The first time we got a call was in 2010, and he was a victim of a serial perpetrator here in San Diego. We started to learn a little bit about Jehovah's Witnesses. That's how it all got started.
This organization has allowed the sexual abuse of children to fester within its ranks for decades.
I was very, very involved with the Catholic priest abuse scandal that swept the nation since the Boston Globe story broke in 2002. We did battle with the Catholic Church, but at the end of the day, they fessed up to the fact that they had a problem. Not so with Jehovah's Witnesses.
The Jehovah's Witnesses continue to insist they don't have a problem. They would much rather prove the accuser wrong and cover up what happened, because then you don't have the problem of the organization looking bad.
They care about their reputation. They don't want their names dragged through the mud.
Their way of dealing with it is to try to keep the lid on as much as possible. We were the first ones really to get to them with litigation. We learned early in our litigation against them that there was a call put out to all of the elders of all of the congregations in the United States in March of 1997.
Back when I was dealing with this is 1997, an article came out in the Awake magazine, Abhor What is Wicked. And in this article, the statement was made that this organization would not appoint a known molester to a position of authority. That was great. That was my moment of saying, 5 years, I worked on this, and they're doing something about it. But what they didn't say in the article is that they had been doing it for probably 4 or 5 decades. I wrote to the editor, and he wrote me back a letter. So I'm reading what he said there, and I'm astounded. And he said, thanks to our legal department, we no longer will have more megabuck lawsuits. Well, that was a shocker to me. I didn't know they had megabuck lawsuits. If I had to pay out megabuck money in a lawsuit, I would certainly do something that wouldn't happen again. After all, this organization is supported by donations. So donations were paying for the megabuck lawsuit settlements.
At this point, Watchtower was becoming to understand that they had a problem internally with child sexual abuse. So in 1997, Watchtower sent a letter to all 10,000 of its US congregations with a questionnaire. It said, if you suspect that you have a child predator in your congregation, please take this questionnaire, fill out these questions, put it in this special blue envelope, and mail it back to Watchtower headquarters, and keep a copy of it in your file in your Kingdom Hall.
When this letter to all elders throughout the world came out, it said that we would like to know the names of known molesters. So that made up a file.
That is how Watchtower inadvertently wound up creating this massive database of child molesters.
That is the file that the Watchtower has never made public. And that is the file that the lawyers want.
We knew what the database contained because of the March 1997 letter. They emphasized the legal risk that they were facing of having potentially known molesters within the congregation. So they were worried about their legal exposure.
I remember where I was standing at that moment when I read that letter. I said, enough, enough. It was at that moment I left the religion.
For us to get to a tipping point in the litigation against the Jehovah's Witnesses, we need to get, first and foremost, these documents. Once we started asking for these files, they started coming up with all kinds of lies about, well, we don't have them, we'd have to go searching for them, it would take 20 years of man hours to find these files, and all this nonsense. Court ordered them to produce it. They said, no, we're not doing it.
Not only did Jehovah's Witnesses refuse to turn over the documents, but they elected to pay a $4,000 per day fine rather than to turn over those documents.
Ultimately, that $4,000 had accrued to about $2 million. They didn't produce the documents, and what happened was they ended up settling that case.
I first found out about the Jehovah's Witnesses as a potential reporting topic in January 2018. I was contacted by a guy I know on Twitter who was an ex-Jehovah's Witness, and he had suggested there were some deep-rooted problems in the religion. I would find if I talked to one abuse survivor, they would put me in touch with another one and another one, and within the space of a few weeks, I had, more than a dozen ex-witnesses who were willing to tell me their experience. This is really a worldwide problem. Mark O'Donnell is one of the ex-Jehovah's Witnesses that I came in contact with, I think, pretty early on for the first story that we published.
What interested me about Mark was that he was the first person apparently to really get his hands on aspects of the database, which nobody had ever managed to do before, and that he was behind leaking some of these documents. Mark is a very mild-mannered, soft-spoken, intelligent, unassuming, unemotional guy. Mark is the last guy on earth that you would think would be an activist. And when you speak to Mark, it takes a little while to understand what's going on behind those glasses and what's turning in that head.
As a child, I didn't feel that I needed to question my faith because I believed what I was being taught. My awakening came around the age of 46 when I began to peer into the outside world and become a little bit more aware of what was going on around me. I just wanted to know truth. I wanted to know what was real and what was not real. And I began to realize that everything I had been taught was false. It was shocking to me that growing up as one of Jehovah's Witnesses, we believed in truth and honesty and transparency, and yet Jehovah's Witnesses have done everything possible to conceal these documents that would have helped the victims, that would have exposed the problem. Why? Why would they do this? What was it that they were hiding? What was it that they didn't want the court to know? What was it that they didn't want the attorneys to know? I believe that now we're uncovering this because it had been concealed for so many years that, like other movements, when one person comes forward, then another person feels the strength to come forward. To realize that there are individuals who are inside the organization who are waking up, who have questions. They might be elders, they might be circuit overseers, they might be people who are just leaving the organization. They are going to reveal a lot more about what's really going on behind the scenes in the Jehovah's Witness organization. Finding out what was in the secret database of pedophiles became the search for the Holy Grail.
I was born into this. I feel as though I was brainwashed, being raised as a Jehovah's Witness. I'm a PMO, I'm physically in, mentally out. And basically what that means is I'm stuck in the organization, but I made the conscious decision of saying, okay, I don't believe this anymore. Basically, I have days where I feel very anxious because if I do get outed as somebody who doesn't believe, then I may lose my family and everybody I love forever, because you can't say that you don't believe and still have your family.
When I decided to uncover the truth about the organization that I had spent my entire life as a part of, I went online and I created the account John Redwood on Facebook. The reason for using an alias is because Jehovah's Witnesses cannot simply leave the organization and speak out or say anything critical of the organization without fear of being disfellowshipped.
It's either you're in and you're with us, or you're not with us and you don't have your family. That's how controlling this organization is.
It's an incredibly powerful behavior control tactic to say, if you ever question the group or break one of our rules, you risk being expelled or excommunicated or disfellowshipped, is the Watchtower term. And then no one will be able to have a relationship with you or even acknowledge you and talk with you.
When you're a part of a community as tight-knit as the Jehovah's Witnesses, where all of your friends, most of their family is witnesses, disfellowshipping is very severe. It can be like a death sentence. I mean, people have killed themselves due to being shunned in this way.
If you speak out against them, if you point out the discrepancies in the religion, then you're disfellowshipped. And that's one of their tactics of control.
They do not tolerate dissent.
The 11th commandment of Jehovah's Witnesses is, thou shalt not go public, and I did.
Good evening. At some point, it may stop being news each time another person comes forward to say they were sexually abused as a child by a trusted religious figure.
This woman, Barbara Anderson, worked for a decade inside Jehovah's Witness headquarters. What she found, she says, sickened her.
The Watchtower Society didn't want to acknowledge that these girls were telling the truth because they were accusing elders of molesting them.
This is the story of Candace Conti, a young woman stepping out of the shadows to take on the all-male leadership of a wealthy, secretive religion who she says failed to protect her from a predatory pedophile.
Candace Conti was a young girl that was abused. They didn't believe her. They did not believe her. There had been lots of lawsuits previous to Candace Conti, but they were all settled and quiet. She was the first one to take Watchtower to court.
They made the mistake in the Candace Conti case of going to trial and getting hammered by a jury once how they handled these cases got exposed.
All right, sir, if you'll please raise your right hand.
When Candace and her attorney began conducting depositions with local church leaders, known as elders, they learned something astonishing.
Do you recall becoming aware at any time of sexual abuse of a child by Jonathan Kindred?
Yes.
In the case of Conti, crimes that were committed were known to not only one elder, not two elders, but entire bodies of elders in multiple congregations, and they had been advised not to call the authorities, which further endangered other victims.
I was disfellowshipped a week before Dateline aired. My son went to the headquarters and discussed my appearance on Dateline. He was told that because your mother went forward, thousands of people have left the organization, and so she's responsible for their deaths at Armageddon. If I'm supposed to be responsible for thousands of people who left because I spoke the truth to the public, then they're responsible for their policies of what has happened to literally tens of thousands and thousands of children. They said that I was disfellowshipped because I was a gross sinner. And I was a threat to the organization. And so what do? We have no family any longer. We lost our son to the fact that he shuns us. I know many people wonder, how in the world can you shun someone that you love? How in the world would you shun your mother? It is because you're told it's an act of love. We found out that we have a granddaughter. We don't know her name. The shunning policy is torture. Because you don't choose to be part of a religion, you have to be punished like that?
One of the features of destructive cults is information control. Destructive cults leave out information, they distort information, and they outright lie.
They find all of these ways to keep people in the dark.
The spread of rumors is like wildfire that is hard to control.
We were told, don't go on the internet, don't read worldly magazines or newspapers, you can't trust the news, you can't trust the media, don't speak to apostates.
I was very surprised to find that my pseudonym, John Redwood, began to have more of a following than I ever expected. I began to investigate and to write, and I realized that many people were relying on the information that I was sharing with the public.
Jehovah's Witnesses define apostate as someone who leaves Jehovah and then becomes an enemy of Jehovah by speaking out against the organization. An apostate is the worst thing you can be as a Jehovah's Witness. And that's because an apostate is a threat.
Whoever, therefore, wants to be a friend of the world is making himself an enemy of God. They will vanish like smoke. Here's what Jehovah's promising. Hey.
In 2016 was when I actually gave myself the okay to look at other material besides material that was published by the Jehovah's Witnesses. And that's when I broke down.
It would have been expected of me to run and tattle on my husband. After Mark stopped going to meetings, they would come to me and say, Mark's hiding a secret. Mark must be cheating on you. Mark must be doing drugs. They encouraged me all the time to leave him. I would walk into Mark's office and he would turn his monitor off. He would flip his Kindle over. He would go in the backyard to be on his phone or his laptop. So then for a very short period of time, I started to question, are they right? Is he hiding something from me? Mark was hiding something. I didn't really know Mark, and that made a small crack for me.
Every witness is taught that Armageddon can come at any day, and if you are not fully in, you're going to die with everyone else on the planet. Even as a kid, that fear was put in me. Doesn't matter how young you are, if you don't follow Jehovah's ways based on what the Jehovah's Witnesses say, you are going to die when Armageddon comes.
There will be a complete genocide. 7 billion, 8 billion, how many ever people there are on the earth, they're dying at Armageddon. And only Jehovah's Witnesses will be saved.
They have Armageddon hanging over the heads of all its members. If you are not with Jehovah, you are with the world. And the world was going to end, and it's going to end soon. They teach fear. They want you to be afraid.
Growing up, I was primed for fear. If I heard like a thunderstorm, my mind instantly would go to thinking it was Armageddon. Like, oh shit, they were right.
It's terrifying, especially for a little child. It's fire coming out of the sky, people just dying left and right. It's just intense.
The end game in terms of the doctrine and what they promise people for all of these years of kind of compliance and being a Jehovah's Witness is living forever in a paradise on earth. And it's called the New System.
I never questioned my faith because I honestly wanted the new system to come. I just needed to know that there was something better out there. That was my drive. If I can make it to the new system, I can finally be happy.
Some of the most powerful images from my childhood, aside from the very negative pictures of Armageddon, would be the positive pictures, the contrast. Things that we wouldn't see now, we would see in the new system of things. And many people really bought into that, and they believed that this was the correct Bible teaching, that Jehovah wanted people to be happy and to live in paradise earth.
When you're a witness, you believe that this life you're living now is just a life in waiting. It's not the real life. Everything is put off to future paradise. You don't live in the present. This isn't the real world. So when that's the basis for your outlook on life, it affects every decision you make.
Mark and I did not have children. My main reason for not having children was because I could have kids in the new system, so what's the rush? The life I was living now was really a kind of a temporary life. I just have to get through, and then I could have the real life. And they call it the real life. At least I got my cats. In November of 2013, Mark and I were on our way to some friend's house for the weekend, and he sat down and said, "I can't do this anymore." And he, at that point, proceeded to let me know that he just wasn't going to be a witness anymore. And of course, that was devastating to me. Mark and I had been married 15 years, and we never had a real honest conversation with each other in 15 years, as I couldn't really tell him what I thought.
Mark Jeffrey O'Donnell, in the presence of Jehovah God and these witnesses, take Kimberly Ann Weber to be your wedded wife in accordance with divine law as outlined in the Holy Scriptures for Christian husbands, for as long as you both may live. Do.
I continued to go to meetings and preach. Mark and I would walk at night and we would talk. For me, I wanted to know what was going on in Mark's head, so I would ask him to just tell me what he was thinking and feeling, and that I understood I wouldn't agree with it, but I needed to know that. I wanted to be supportive for him. So he was very careful and very selective of some things that he told me. One thing that he mentioned to me was the case about Candace Conti. I went home and I looked up the court documents. I was shocked. Candace Conti sued Watchtower over her abuse and how it was mishandled by the elders and not reported to the police. And immediately that resonated with me. That's my personal experience, where I was told not to report to the police for my abuse. I was shocked to learn that the two-witness rule was actually a policy of the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses. That two-witness rule affected me personally. It really ruined my life.
The two-witness rule is really central doctrine for the Jehovah's Witnesses.
The scripture is very, very clear. It says, no single witness may convict another for any error or any sin that he may commit. It's very clear, isn't it?
There are a lot of people that have been sexually abused, and it's all been swept under the rug because of the two-witness rule. You can't apply that rule to sexual assault. You can't.
Where is there going to be two witnesses to such a crime?
My mother suffered from a personality disorder, which wasn't diagnosed till later in life. She was extremely abusive. She's not a very nice person. So she was one of Jehovah's Witnesses, and she would kind of use the Bible as part of her abuse with us. She would read scriptures to us about, make sure you obey your mother, and then she would beat us and did certain, awful things. I have an older brother and an older sister. My mom would lock us in rooms. She turned the doorknob so the lock was on the outside, so she could lock us for days at a time in our room with no access to the restroom. We'd have to, go out the window or use a litter box. We would watch her drown kittens in front of us. It kind of threatened us that if we spoke up about the abuse, this is kind of what would happen to us. She would beat us. She would starve us. I was malnourished. I was very skinny. I was all skin and bones. My clavicle was always sticking out. I had dark circles under my eyes. I was sexually abused as well by my mother. My father worked different shifts at his job, so there were times he worked 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., and so we were left alone with my mom. She would make us lay in bed next to her while she masturbated. 12 years old, went to an elder, and I informed him about the serious abuse that was going on in our home. But because it was my word against my mother's word, they would take no action. I asked for help. They actually reasoned with me that if I died at the hands of my mother, which was a real possibility, could she stop Jehovah from resurrecting me? And of course, the logical answer was no. And so instead of giving me any practical help, even providing some food or reporting to Child Protective Services, I was sent back home to face this horrible, horrific abuse. On top, I was told I couldn't report it because it would make the organization look bad. The abuse was so bad that I actually remember looking at my mom and thinking, if I just kill her right now, or I kill myself, this would be over. And sorry. I always have in my mind a picture of a little girl that I pushed down, and so she's the one that was abused, and I have to separate myself. If those brothers had helped me when I was 12, I wouldn't have had to deal with what I dealt with. They had made one phone call to Child Protective Services. She's still an active witness. She's around children. I have nightmares. My mom flushing kittens down the toilet, or tying them up in a plastic bag and listening to them cry and die in front of you. She's a psychopath. So you don't say anything. I just put a smile on my face. No one knew what was going on outside. No one knew, and I knew the risk that I took. I went to those elders. I was putting my life on the line because if my mom found out that I told anyone about the abuse, she would have killed me. And those brothers said, go home and obey your mother.
She didn't talk about it until after I left the organization. She didn't talk about the fact that the elders had covered up specific allegations of abuse and told her to leave the matter in Jehovah's hands. Now it was personal.
I gave my life to this organization. I turned down a full scholarship to an Ivy League school, and I wanted to be a doctor. And instead, I turned that all down for an organization that wouldn't protect me.
Being a witness is an everyday commitment.
It's not enough to just believe and then have a normal life outside of your belief system. You are to spend hours in the ministry going out, knocking on doors, because that's how you demonstrate your faith to God.
You can't celebrate Christmas, you can't go to a birthday party. It's a really busy life. You're spending the vast majority of your time doing things that have to do with being a witness. And that was the price that you willingly paid for the truth.
They degrade colleges and universities. They degrade professors. You'll see that smattered all over Jehovah's Witness literature, their talks, their videos, the dangers of higher education.
Higher education often instills a sense of superiority and self-reliance that is in direct opposition to the Christian personality. We will not need doctors or lawyers after Armageddon, but we will need carpenters and plumbers and similar construction trades. It requires faith to decline higher education and have the confidence that our material needs will be cared for by training in other fields.
We really believed. We studied, we made sacrifices for this religion. I served as a pioneer, which would mean working as a volunteer full-time.
The organization taught that we should either be pioneers, meaning full-time ministry, or we should be building kingdom halls or going to Bethel to work at the world headquarters complexes.
Every time that there was a crossroad, I would give something up to continue being a good Jehovah's Witness. Once I left, I realized that I was living under constant stress. They teach you you're not good enough, that you were born imperfect, and that you will never be perfect until the new system.
Let's remember these words and this counsel. When you have done all the things assigned to you, say, we are good-for-nothing slaves. What we have done is what we ought to have done.
I remember growing up and hearing talks throughout my whole life. You are a good-for-nothing slave. And we would repeat that. We are good-for-nothing slaves. We owe our lives to God because he created us. Turning around and asking yourself, can I start over again? Do I have the strength to do that? Is a very scary thing. From an early age, you're raised with no self-esteem, no self-awareness, no confidence. I didn't have prom, I didn't have birthdays, I didn't have dates, I didn't have college. You feel like you're robbed, like someone stole something from you. And you feel angry and justifiably so. My first memories as a child was being pushed in a stroller and going door to door with my mother, trying to recruit people. This is my book bag that I would carry around with me when I would go door to door, full-time pioneering. So there's just full-time knocking on doors and trying to recruit people. This brings back memories. It all started with my mom. We met a Jehovah's Witness, and they showed her a couple of scriptures from the Bible she'd never seen before. So at the time she was pregnant with me, I never had a father figure. She was mom and dad. I was baptized, and in here, I just found this shit. I still have the t-shirt I was baptized in. It was in San Francisco at the Cow Palace with 10,000 Jehovah's Witnesses like watching. I was hyped. You had to wear the white shirt because that means you're starting new. It's fresh. It's loose fitting, so it's modest. My mom was excited. I remember like even walking into the heated pool, something feeling like it left my body. I felt like I was dirty and that was restarting, so I felt clean again, and I felt something like a spirit had left my body. Like when I came out of the water, I felt, you know, I had a second chance at life because I was born a sinner. But I also felt a lot more pressure because you're basically marrying Jehovah God. You're just dedicated to him no matter what. You're always under pressure to be perfect and to set the right example. And, you know, every time it's not, something's wrong with you. I was like 4 or 5. And it was your classic, you know, they're close to the family, trusted member of the family, you're left alone. I spent the night at his house, and he took advantage one night, and I knew I wanted to leave. I just didn't know what to do because I was 4 years old. He was 17, 18, so he's not super old, but he was old enough to know that like that was not okay. He said, yeah, don't talk about this is just between us. My mom comes from abuse. I guess I was saying some weird things, and she's like, wait, what does that mean? Tell me what happened. And then she immediately burst into tears and set up a meeting with the elders. She sought to talk to them for direction, for everything. They told her the classics, like, don't talk about it. We don't want to bring a reproach on Jehovah's name, so we don't want to make the religion look bad. It's in Jehovah's hands. He'll fix it in the new system when the world ends and everyone who's not a Jehovah's Witness will die. And they just pretty much dismissed everything. When I woke up, it was about a solid month of depression and sadness and crying and panic and anxiety attacks. I found out everything I was taught was a lie.
Once someone starts learning about the group and it kind of hits them that they've been in a cult, there's a lot of trauma that can happen around that. Realizing that you've missed out on a lot of things in life, lost milestones, lost achievements and accomplishments, that's very distressing.
A month later, I had my little DSLR that I had saved up for because I wanted to be a filmmaker, and all of a sudden I was free to chase that, and I was like, I'm gonna vlog because people need to know about this, and I just want to help 10 people. So that got me involved in activism with child abuse. When I started, there was a handful of YouTubers, and there's a lot of Reddit posts, but now there's tons of YouTubers.
I am a survivor of childhood sexual abuse. I don't remember exactly when the abuse started. Lots of people knew. Nobody did anything about it. No one called the police.
I myself have been through a ton of abuse.
Is there policies that's protecting pedophiles?
I went to the internet to search for Jehovah's Witness teachings, and I saw that there were a lot of people who came out as victims of child abuse in the organization. I knew what child abuse was, but never in my life had I imagined that this was such a strong, ongoing issue. I discovered that the Jehovah's Witnesses were not giving their documents about alleged abuse to the court. They decided to keep this all hidden somewhere in the Kingdom Hall, and most members inside the organization didn't even know it was occurring.
I think that probably 95, 99% of active Jehovah's Witnesses have no clue about the abuse that goes on. If they were looking at it like this actually happened, they would blow most people away.
I had a very good idea of where these documents were kept.
I went back to the memorial. I was hoping to have some kind of proof.
I knew that someone had to go into the Kingdom Halls and get these documents.
I found this elder. I grew up with him. I had a past history and relationship with him, and I was hoping that this would trigger something human to come out. Should be some guys dressed kind of nice that just came in. Right here? Okay. Yeah, I think so. I was hoping to have some kind of proof and get a confession about my abuse. He said that he'd love to talk to me about the depression that I was going through and how I was feeling about my child abuse growing up. I've been having a lot of nightmares, flashbacks, and just solid amounts of depression based off of some stuff that happened to me as a child. And I don't feel like it was handled properly.
You just learn to live with it and put it behind you. Try not to bring it up, try not to dwell on it. And,
Try not to bring it up or dwell on it? But then that's not dealing with the issue either.
the same thing happened with my kids. They had no breakfast. If nothing was done, if there's nothing done back in those days, like my kids, there was nothing done, there's nothing can be done.
And that makes you feel okay as a father?
I can't change it.
Number one, you need two witnesses.
It just sounds like there's a lot of holes in the policies, and
I don't know what kind of holes you're looking for, kid. There's no holes in the policy. I guarantee there's no holes in any policy. Wherever your head's going with that, there's no holes in the policy.
I know the names of the guys that hurt me, and neither of you have asked.
Okay, so
that concerns me. That's not dealing with the issue, because if they're still out there and they're still around children, you gotta take precautions to protect the children. Children first, no matter what. Then why aren't you doing it right now? I don't think anything has changed in the organization. There's one of the most stubborn religious organizations where they just throw children's lives away like it's nothing. People need to know about this. There's no protections in place for children, and they're going to take the side of the abuser because there's no eyewitness. So nothing's changed. Hey, brothers and sisters, if you haven't seen the Going to Memorial as an Apostate video yet, you should watch that.
Although the governing body tries to say that people will lie about us on the internet.
Be careful on the internet. We're just warning you that all we can do is admonish. Stick with what we have authorized. You'll be safe.
There's no way that this could all be lied about.
New sexual abuse allegations tonight against Jehovah's Witnesses.
The alleged victim's claims an elder
says she was molested by a fellow church member.
A pattern of alleged child abuse.
The commission learned that of those hundreds of cases, none was reported to police.
At the time, I was still a member of the congregation.
This is what Jehovah, the God of Israel, says.
So everyone in the congregation saw me as a regular, spiritually strong, trusted member.
Before he resurrects him, he's going to create a perfect place for them, a paradise here on earth.
But on the inside, I had my doubts. I was only going there to keep my family and friends. My father was very high up. He was a well-respected member. He had a lot of privilege, and he pretty much was the leader of our congregation, and he wanted myself to grow up and be the same way. So he taught me a lot, and I found that growing up I knew much more than the typical witness regarding what goes on behind the scenes. My father taught me that when something occurred inside the Kingdom Hall, that brother or sister would meet with a couple of elders in a secret meeting. It was just that person who had some problem and 2 or 3 elders speaking with them.
A judicial committee is a group of 3 elders in the congregation who will convene for a series of private meetings with someone who has committed a sin or to hear an accusation. They believe, and they're trying to get to the bottom of it, with the end goal of, do we have mercy on this person or do we disfellowship them?
This would all be documented and filed away and locked for no one to see except the elders. I was curious as to what is really hidden in the Kingdom Halls, what's really locked away.
At that point, when Judas started getting curious, we had been dating for about 5 or 6 years. I felt the need to take action because we had the ability to. We had a set of picks that we used. Some doors were very difficult to get open. So in that instance, we would go to meetings during the day, crack open one of the windows, and then come back later at night and crawl through the windows. I was paranoid the whole time. Every small noise I heard, I would pause, be quiet. Then we can continue. We went through all the files that we thought were suspicious. We had little knives to cut open the files. We had our glue sticks and then glue it back together as if it were never opened.
I came across this big envelope titled "Child Abuse, Do Not Destroy."
We found way more pedophile activity than we anticipated.
Hundreds of pages in just one congregation.
These were people I grew up with. These were people I knew. So it shocked me.
I could not believe what I was reading and how extensive, how severe, and how detailed these documents were. It was horrifying.
Seeing the pedophiles not getting the consequences they deserved infuriated me. So that caused us to act and get as many files as we could on them.
I felt that it was my responsibility to get these documents and get them out to the public and really show the true nature of the organization. I ended up posting on an XJW page on the internet with one small letter that I found, a sample, so to speak. Once I posted that, I began to receive a lot of messages. One message that grabbed my attention was from someone named John Redwood.
There is a subreddit group called XJW, which has something like 55,000 members. And an individual had posted some information that indicated that he may have found some documents inside of congregations that dealt directly with child sexual abuse.
We gained each other's trust, and I saw that we were fighting for the same cause.
I received an anonymous package of documents, which was very extensive. Many of the documents were handwritten notes. They were notes from elders. They were notes from the victims themselves and from Watchtower's communication back and forth to the congregations. And I knew immediately that this was serious.
I really have evolved over the decades as I've learned more and more about the Jehovah's Witnesses to really think of them as a more and more destructive cult. The pedophilia, predatory institution, the shunning, the fear of Armageddon, how many people have been harmed by that institutional abuse.
For example, if you take the blood issue, tens and tens of thousands of people have died for not taking a blood transfusion.
People have died for no reason based on an arbitrary misreading of the Torah.
Refusing blood transfusions comes from a loosely interpreted scripture in Acts, where you are told not to eat blood, and apparently that's the same as taking a blood transfusion, I guess. That's how they see it anyway.
What does the Bible say about blood transfusions? The Bible commands that we not ingest blood. Note the following scriptures. Genesis 9:4. God allowed Noah and his family to add animal flesh to their diet after the flood, but commanded them not to eat the blood.
People die for this all the time, like even children, like little babies die from it. And nobody bats an eye. In fact, people will usually like put these people on a pedestal, the people that die. They're martyred.
That's something that I think is hard for people to wrap their minds around if they're not a part of the religion.
The 7-year-old boy facing death because his parents' religious beliefs prohibit blood transfusions.
Because both parents are Jehovah's Witnesses, they do not want to see their baby girl get any foreign blood, even if it is a matter of life and death.
It's thought the medical team wanted to carry out a blood transfusion, but the family, being Jehovah's Witnesses, refused. 6 hours later, he died.
Jehovah's Witnesses are causing people to die due to not taking blood transfusions that shouldn't be dead. It's pretty nefarious.
I believe that God wanted us to be loyal and not accept a blood transfusion because the life was in the blood. I never questioned any of that. To me, it was always a matter of loyalty.
You can change people's thoughts and get them to engage in behaviors that are against self-preservation. And I think that's the scary thing, and witnesses do that really, really well.
Most people will do what they've been taught is the right thing to do, even if it means losing their life.
I had already started questioning the religion, the cult. And eventually, I started to think, maybe God is real, but it's not this.
I don't know what I'm doing.
My mom was baptized when she was 12. My mom was married when she was 14. The elders sanctioned that, by the way. They were the ones who told my grandmother to do that. My grandma tried to make my mom live with my dad, but my mom was a kid, and she wanted to come back home, and she did come back home. Originally, I was raised by my mother. I was living with her and my grandmother at the same time.
Hey, I'm over here, babe.
I was indoctrinated from, like, the womb on. I was 2 years old, and I'm walking around quoting scripture. I had questions my whole childhood, and they never got answered. Growing up as a Jehovah's Witness and being part of the LGBT community was very stressful, and it was filled with a lot of self-hatred and repression.
Keep clean before Jehovah and enjoy his blessing. The first way you can do this is by avoiding tight-fitting clothes that can identify you with homosexuality. These clothes contribute to changing people's opinion of homosexuality because they come to see it as normal and acceptable.
I asked my grandmother, I remember, how do we know that we're the right religion? How do we know it's not something else? And she would just tell me, because the Bible says so. She would always give me answers like that that just weren't satisfying and didn't make sense. My mom started to drink more in her early to mid-20s.
Work, work, work.
She started abusing painkillers. When I was 17 years old, my mom got very ill after a car accident. And she ended up in the hospital. We didn't realize it at the time, but she was suffering from a lot of organ damage from chronic alcoholism. All of her organs were failing. They were telling us that she needed a blood transfusion. My mom had brain swelling at the time, so they said that she couldn't make the decision for herself. They were leaving the choice up to my grandma. I distinctly remember there being like a whole swarm of elders. They were the hospital liaison committee. That's what they're called.
Serious medical situations are stressful, and decisions often need to be made quickly, including those involving blood. The Hospital Liaison Committee arrangement provides comfort and help at the right time.
They were there basically to make sure that my grandmother made the right choice.
The hospital liaison committees have been a very powerful tool in the hand of Jehovah to provide this support and strength when the blood issue arises. What a beautiful gift Jehovah has given his people through the fine work of the hospital liaison committees. Truly, this has been a strengthening aid for us to keep abstaining from blood.
Often these brothers coming, this committee, to the bedside of a Jehovah's Witness who is in distress or in a health situation, it can turn into coercion, like trying to convince a person not to take blood that could save their life.
When a child or any family member needs a blood transfusion and they can't do it, you know, Jehovah's Witnesses will make sure that they're always on the scene, reminding you of the reasons why you should obey these things, even though they're against human nature as a parent.
They would be in the waiting room. They were in her room. They were surrounding her bed, you know, just a bunch of suits, strong-arming an old lady into killing her daughter.
What did you buy this for, Mommy?
My grandmother knew what she was supposed to do. She was supposed to sacrifice her daughter to the organization. For hours and hours, different doctors came in and they were trying to like tell her the mortal peril she was putting my mother in by allowing her to have this surgery without any blood transfusion. But still, even after all those hours of deliberation, my grandmother, of course, said no blood and signed off on the consent form, and that was it. She passed away. When my mother died, that was pretty much the last straw for me. I had such a hard time reconciling how somebody could do that to their own child. I took that as a sign like, my family means business about this religion. Like, they are willing to kill each other over this. I'm gonna go and try to talk to my grandmother about what happened with my mother. The last time I spoke to her was over a year ago. I just want to understand why. I'm on my way to go and confront my grandmother. It's been over a year since I've seen her, and I'm really hoping that I can just have at least a coherent conversation with her. Oh shit, that's my grandma's garage opening. That's fantastic. Oh, let's do it. All right. Hi. Hi. Can I have a hug? Huh? Can I have a hug? It's been like a year since I've seen you. I'm sorry. I just haven't seen you in forever. There's always been some stuff I wanted to ask you, like about my mom. When you had to make that choice, was it hard?
She chose, and actually, I am happy.
But
to make the right decision.
It didn't hurt?
No.
It didn't hurt you to do that?
No, honey.
Not at all?
That's what she wanted.
But Mom,
she'll be resurrected.
Yeah, but she wasn't even a practicing Jehovah's Witness at the time.
It doesn't matter. She made a good choice, and I'm so happy.
One more hug. I'm sorry. I never get to see you anymore.
Okay, well,
I hope everything's okay.
Time is short.
Time is short.
And you can see your mom again, because she is going to be resurrected.
It's upsetting that a group would control people this way. So once it kind of hits them, it's going through the process of saying, I'm still here, I'm still alive, and I'm going to make the most of this.
It becomes very important to speak up, and everyone finds their own way to do that. A lot of Jehovah's Witnesses, when you leave, people are empowered now to say, hey, this happened to me, and I'm gonna speak up about it because it was wrong and I don't want it to happen to somebody else.
I've always wanted to crash Kingdom Halls. I've always wanted to go in there and say something to them. I can't help but think about all the people that are still stuck in the cult. I'm planting some kind of a seed. I just want them to hear some of what I'm saying. They don't have to hear everything. Just enough to make them think, is that something that's worth looking into?
Jehovah, our Heavenly Father, I come to you in prayer and ask that you please forgive us for your ever-changing blood doctrine, which has caused so many needless deaths, including that of my mother, Elizabeth Van Hassel. My mother died from the blood doctrine. Her name is Elizabeth Van Hassel. She was only 32 years old when she passed away. My mother died because her mother made the choice for her not to have blood. Not only that, but there are people that you are shunning, and they are committing suicide over this. Please don't shun your family members. Please, I beg you, do not shun your family members. We love you. We care about you. We don't want you to shun us. We care about you.
It was your mother.
Also, sir, do you? Let go of me, sir. You cannot be touching me. Do you practice?
My name. What's my name?
You're a Jehovah's Witness. That is against the law.
I really want people to look at my videos, and I want them to see an example of what they can do. I want them to see a human being suffering, because it's very real and it happens all the time. I want them to see hell in a human and see what that does to somebody.
Jehovah's Witnesses are continuing a more than month-long convention at the Santander Arena. It's expected to draw more than 25,000 Jehovah's Witnesses from 218 congregations in Pennsylvania.
Right when the convention was starting on Sunday morning, I was an attendant, and I just went on the XJW Reddit page, and I just made a post that said they were checking lapel badges and making sure that no protesters got inside and started talking to people. 30 minutes into the Sunday convention, I see a comment from John Redwood.
My abuser's rights were protected, and I was silenced.
My 4-year-old daughter was molested by a teenage boy in the Kingdom Hall.
It was very important to us as parents of a survivor of child sex abuse to let other parents know that there are abusers in the organization.
These elders who sit here on these judicial committees who know some of this stuff say at conventions and across the stage at congregations that we abstain from this type of stuff.
Report to the police, not to the elders. It's okay. It's okay to read. Thanks, guys. Good morning.
Their stock response is that Jehovah's Witnesses abhor child abuse. And they are correct. They do abhor child abuse. That's not the issue. The issue is, how do they handle a child abuse allegation? So here we have a group of elders that are debriefing a victim who has said that there were multiple men sexually assaulting her going all the way back to when she was 4 years of age. How old were you when this happened? Answer, 4 years old. Did he do anything of a sexual nature, like touch your private parts? Answer, yes. Can you tell us who was in the room? Answer, who was convicted of raping his half-sister. A blonde man was there, a red-haired man with a red beard, and who is the main perpetrator in the Palmer Leaks case. These documents represent the fact that there was an internal investigation at great depth into the crimes committed by this perpetrator and other perpetrators who were also Jehovah's Witnesses. The package of documents from Judas contained multiple cases of child sexual abuse, none of which were ever turned over to the police by the congregation elders. There was one case in particular called the Palmer Leaks, and this involved the Palmer congregation in Massachusetts. What we discovered is that the 2 daughters of this man, who was an elder for some period of time, had been viciously and severely abused by their father.
I knew that the Palmer congregation is just one congregation. I also knew that there were hundreds, maybe tens of thousands of cases that were not released, and this was just one case, a sample, so to speak.
I had no choice but to do something about it. If I didn't speak up, then this information would be buried forever.
When the Palmer Leaks came out, it was a big story. It was picked up by media all over the world. The documents were incendiary because these were essentially the first time that copies of database documents were seen by the public. By any estimation, there are tens of thousands of people named in the database. This was just a sample of what people imagined could be in the database.
The reason why I think they're so adamant in protecting these files is because they must have a concern of what these files are going to tell the world about their organization and how they don't protect children and instead protect these pedophiles and their brand, if you will.
Watchtower has sued the organization who was actually hosting the documents. But as a result of the release of those documents to not only the public, but to the police, there is now an investigation by the police.
What it boils down to is people seeing firsthand a serious problem that is not otherwise ever going to be addressed by this large institution that's behind it.
I am on a mission. I haven't seen or talked to my mother maybe 3 or 4 times in the last 3 or 4 years. We set up a loose time and a loose date for us to meet up for coffee on the weekend. She disappears. I just don't hear from her. She wasn't there, and I ended up finding out why, because she knew I would be there to be too painful for her to see. Instead, I ran into one of my abusers. I didn't see him until the very end. I just remember feeling like really angry and just upset. It infuriated me because this guy who up my childhood, I kept thinking about, like, what about the next kid, I ended up finding out something happened and I couldn't be there to protect him. I couldn't be there to protect my family. I just felt useless and powerless because that's how the system is built, is for these child abusers to get away with this shit.
Watchtower's legal department looks for a loophole in how to escape mandatory reporting, because most states have mandatory reporting.
The Jehovah's Witnesses argue that all of this information by their religious tenets is to be kept confidential, no matter who gets to see it.
They tell the elders, you have no obligation to report.
That's their loophole that they've made and they've stuck to.
They want to manage their own judicial process, which includes child abuse. And because of that, we have this conflict between church and state.
I think they've become much more entrenched. They've become much more defiant. They have done very little to improve the risk factors that would lead up to child sexual abuse.
After the Atlantic article came out, the very next day, 2 elders from our local congregation made multiple attempts to reach us. It was obvious they were trying to bully us and to hold us accountable for speaking out.
My article for The Atlantic was a larger look at the Jehovah's Witness organization, at the religion, at their child sexual abuse issues, and it was also a profile of Mark O'Donnell.
The Atlantic article was released March 22nd, 2019, and exactly 1 day later, there were 2 elders that came to our front door. The 2 elders that had come to my home were elders that we were very familiar with. In fact, the first elder was the elder who conducted our marriage ceremony, and now he's at our door, and we were not there. Within a few weeks, we had received 2 certified letters, one to Kimmy, one addressed to me, and those letters were basically demanding that we come to a judicial hearing at the Perry Hall Kingdom Hall on the charge of causing divisions. They felt that we were somehow disrupting the congregation or causing divisions. I knew that they were seeking our disfellowshipping. I really didn't care as much as I did care about the effect that it had on my elderly mother. She is a faithful witness, and she has a very strong belief in the Bible and the resurrection. She doesn't have any other children, so we are the only family that she has. It would really hurt her to know that her only son has been disfellowshipped and can no longer speak to any witnesses whatsoever.
Now, as mentioned, we do have quite a few announcements, so please bear with me. First, this is to inform the congregation that Mark O'Donnell is no longer one of Jehovah's Witnesses. And this is to inform the congregation that Kimberly O'Donnell is no longer one of Jehovah's Witnesses.
I'm not a fool. I know that the organization goes after whistleblowers. It has for decades. Anyone who speaks out against the organization or its policies, they will be disfellowshipped. I really feel that the timing of our disfellowshipping says a lot about this organization. The fact that we would speak our truth and tell our story in the Atlantic, and we were disfellowshipped, it says a lot about the lengths that the organization of Jehovah's Witnesses will go to chase down a whistleblower.
Mark has absolutely had a huge impact and is likely to, I think Mark is at the very beginning of what he's doing. I think in the next 10 to 20 years, we're going to see the real breadth of impact that Mark is going to have.
We'll continue to do what we can to bring about transparency and bring about change, and to be here to support people as they leave. We had been married 15 years before we really opened up to one another. You can leave and be happy. And I'm happy.
I'm still terrified of what my family is gonna say because, you know, I crash all those halls and everything, and I go out and I protest and everything, but I didn't really fully understand myself until actually just recently. I'm finally out as being a man, and I can't believe it took that long. Like, I still can't believe it took that long. So, yeah, my family would not be very pleased if they knew that not only am I trans, but I'm also gay. I think that'll shut the door forever.
It feels terrible. It feels awful to know that the mother that is supposed to love you doesn't want to see you because you changed your beliefs. I don't know if I'll have a relationship with my mom again. I mean, it's been years. That's probably my biggest fear is her passing away and me finding out months or years later. I wish that she could be a part of my life. I wish that she could, you know, see the production company I'm doing and even see the activism and see how good it is. I wish she could see the good things.
Here we go. All right, second or first?
After we left the organization, it was nice to just exist as Mark and Kimmy and figure out who we were and what we liked and find that connection.
Yeah.
Thanks, Kimmy. Am I up? Probably not. It's supposed to rain, I think. My legs hurt. Tomorrow's supposed to rain. Like that.
You can be friends with non-witnesses and they're not going to rob you or rape you.
There we go. Good.
News alert, according to their terminology and their doctrine, Mark and I will not be part of the new system.
Come on, Mark. You ready to run?
Nice shot.
We will be killed here at Armageddon if we don't die before then. We've had our final judgment. Yeah. But we do have freedom of thought, freedom to do what we want, right? So no longer living this temporary life. We're having fun, we're enjoying ourselves, we have, you know, real relationships. So now we're living.
Until Watchtower accepts that this is not strictly a moral failing, that there is a psychological problem, and that these people need help, they need medical attention, they need to be reported to the authorities, this is going to continue to happen.
I think if developments keep coming at the pace and rate that they have so far, within a few years' time, we'll be looking at, you know, one of the largest cover-ups of religious, institutionalized sexual abuse that anyone has ever heard of.
If they had reported it immediately to the authorities, it would have prevented other children from getting molested. I have publicly made this statement since 2002, that it is not just a sin, it's a crime, and you report crime to the authorities.
The organization has changed over time. They've been forced to. They've predicted the end of the world, and the end of the world hasn't come. So they've changed. They can change. But so far, they've shown no appetite to change in these areas.
The scriptures are very clear. Before a judicial committee can be convened, there has to be a confession or 2 witnesses. So we will never change our scriptural position on that subject.
And we get rid of all drafts. We no longer keep drafts. So once we've finalized our document, we clean out all drafts. And the reason is because there's many comments that are sometimes made on drafts. Those are the ones that get us in trouble. But we know that the scene of this world is changing, and we know Satan's coming after us. And he's going to go for us legally.
I want to be whoever I want to be. And that's why I left. Better your life, better yourself without that organization.
This is a brand new world for me and my family, but it's exciting.
I couldn't be happier now to be able to share my story and my truth with you.
The world needs to see that the Jehovah's Witnesses do not give a shit.
I hope that it helps somebody out there, that it touches some person who's still stuck in the cold.
There's so much to do in this world. It's a much bigger place than the witnesses make it seem to be, and a much more loving place.